leadership in an uncertain world. I think this is a very important topic, and it has, the last year has tested our abilities of some of the most seasoned leaders that we have in the world in terms of how to navigate the uncertainties of the COVID scenario and its associated other challenges that have appeared. However, leading an organization through what one of the members in one of the panels yesterday called as the great disruption is an absolute imperative. Leading through a high degree of uncertainty while keeping people focused, showing a level of empathy, and then helping understand the vagaries of an external environment that is in flux has been a hallmark of great leadership that has been defined over the last year. And a lot of these leadership is being situational and not necessarily positional. So there have been people who have come up through the organization, who have stepped forward and actually been able to lead the way through this. This afternoon's Fireside Chat is with a person who couldn't be better to help demystify this topic for us. Arundhati Bhattacharya, who after a stellar career at one of the world's largest banks as its chairperson, then decided to do a follow-on innings with a tech company, Salesforce India. And I would like to welcome Arundhati to the stage now. And Arundhati, I think the audience is all ready and agog to hear from you in terms of, this entire premise of reimagining leadership in an uncertain world. Mm-hmm. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, and thank you. Would you want me to start straight away?
No, I think, no, absolutely. I think everybody's here to hear you, not me. Okay. But at the same time, I think it'd be great to start with, your own leadership style and tenets that you have developed over all these years. And okay. What stands out, as you look out over the last year, for example, right? What are some of those tenets that stood the test of time from your perspective?
Okay, so let me talk about 2 or 3 things. There can be so many leadership traits and everybody has something different. But I think the 2 or 3 things, especially during this time of the pandemic, that I think that have stood us in good stead. I think the number one in times such as these, I would put as courage. I think courage is extremely important. Courage to face up to the situation, to know that, yes, things are not going to be perfectly all right. The courage to know that this is the time when you really need to sort of, not tread the beaten path, but find a new way. The courage to be able to have those conversations about, tightening the belt and doing whatever it takes in order to keep your head above water. So I think, courage is something that's extremely important, because at times such as these, you have to lead from the front. There is no time then to push others ahead and sort of take a back seat. You have to be there, out there, really being, really leading. The second thing that I think, is very important is for people to be able to envision how things are going to happen in the future. And in fact, I was just joking with a few friends that, we used to do a lot of pattern recognition when we joined the bank, as one of the things that used to be given in the test that we appeared for in order to become probationary officers. And pattern recognition was one portion of the logical testing that they used to do. And now I realize, why that pattern recognition is so important. Because, you have very few data points and still you need to be able to predict what and how things are going to fall out. And that is very difficult to do if you don't have the skills to put together known and, half known or unknown data, and then still come up with a picture that you can paint as to how things are going to pan out. And the better you're able to paint the picture and the more accurate you are going to be able to bring that much of value into leadership. And last but not least, I think that leaders during such times need to remain very grounded in the sense that they have to be hands-on. They have to get their hands and feet dirty if it is required, to be so to say in the trenches, to be able to listen to what others are saying and then pick up from them the cues, as to how things could be done, what could be a better way of looking at it, what could be ideas, that come from the very many people who are there with you, in order to sort of determine what should be the roadmap, how should you really face up in situations such as this. So I think, if you ask me, I think these are three values which I would definitely, look for in people, especially during these difficult times.
Great. No, I think all three are very, very critical, and they stand the test of time, don't they? I mean,
Yeah.
courage and being able to, make sense of the world with very few data points to work with, but envisioning, projecting, leading with vision to a large extent, and then, like you said, stay hands-on. So in the sense that you are connected with people on the ground, you understand the situation, etc. But driving change is hard in any organization. Even in normal circumstances, driving change is hard when everybody's frozen because of various other factors and uncertainties. It gets even harder. Could you talk a little bit about how would you harness the three tenets that you mentioned, in terms of these three areas, to help the organization move forward? How do you help people get over their fears, their own courage to a large extent, because some of this is injecting a confidence into people and getting them to move forward. That'd be great to hear in terms of how you think people could do that, as you look at it.
So, change, especially, change in behavior of people is very difficult to do. What is most difficult is not to change the external, but to change what is in here. Because,
Mm-hmm.
people have these ideas as to what is right and what is wrong and what's the best way of getting things done. And they have seen certain ways of doing things and they are loath to part from them. But actually speaking, I think, driving change in times of crisis is far easier than driving change when everything is fine. When everything is looking good, when everything is running smoothly, you bring in a lot of change and people will start questioning why. However, when things are really, really bad, when the chips are down, that resistance seems to, at least in my view, that resistance seems to be less. People are more willing to try out new things because they see the danger on the horizon. They know that things have got to be different. And therefore, the resistance to doing something that's entirely different, entirely new, that seems to come down. So, in my view, actually, times of crisis are great, great times to drive change because people are more willing to listen to what you're saying in the sense that they are willing to try out because they themselves don't have the solution. For instance, when we started this work from home, I remember in 2015, I had tried to drive a work from home platform for the State Bank of India. And I had tried to do this because I had wanted the ladies who could not, come out of their houses, not to have to give up their careers, but to work from home. There are maybe, very small infants at home, children at home. You're not in a position to leave them, but that have the time in order to put in, say, a 8-hour day. You just need to be around. So I wanted to put in such a platform. And at that point of time, there was so much of resistance, not only from the men, by the way, even from the women. And because they had a feeling that unless and until somebody is supervising you, the production people will not be able to do the work. Now, that was something that happened in a trice in this crisis.
Right.
Everybody just used, we said work from home, and that's what they were doing. They were working from home. So that resistance that is there when things are happening normally wears out or is rather put into abeyance when you have a crisis going. And therefore, I think, as is said by much wiser men than me, that never waste a crisis. I think, this crisis we should not waste. This is truly a time for us to look at how we do things differently. What are the different things we do? So, in every single way possible, whether it is the way we do things or what are the other things that we can do over and above this, both of these, I think this is the best time for us to have a look because, this is a time otherwise when we have a pause, when we have challenges that we have never had before, and we have to innovate as to how we go ahead and meet.
No, absolutely. And I think and you absolutely make a great point in terms of work from home. I think this has been cited so many times again, in the last year or so, that everything that we imagined would not happen have just happened, right? And then nothing has fallen off the cliff because this has happened, especially in organizations. In some organizations like technology, we take it for granted that you can do a certain amount of work remotely. But in many others, which is very people driven, there was always that question mark, and like you rightly said. But the other side to this is culture building. Part of leadership is how do you build the right culture? And as you said, when you start to work remotely and when everybody is dispersed, cultural building, it's easy when you're all in the office. I mean, it's easy to get people together to do this. And you yourself, Arundhati, you onboarded onto Salesforce at a time when everybody was working from home. So I'd love to hear from you, your approaches of yourself, how you integrate yourself into a new organization, as well as how do you bring in new people and existing people and bring them together in a culture in this new way of working as we look ahead.
So, that actually has been a far more difficult problem to solve. I wouldn't say that about myself. Being the India chair, they have taken special care where I'm concerned. So if I have a problem with my laptop, it gets attended in the next half an hour. If I have a problem, getting some connectivity or accessing some page, all of that gets resolved by at least two people. So, for me, the experience really hasn't been too bad. Not only that, when I seek somebody's time, it's readily given. Again, because I'm heading the operations, and if I'm asking for time, they shift around other meetings and they make time for me. So my experience really has not been too bad. Yes, of course, I would have loved to have met them personally. I'm sure the connect that I would have been able to create by now with an organization such as this would have been far more than what I have been able to create with the thumbnail kinds of pictures that I see on the screen when I do group meetings. There is no comparison. A physical presence does give you a lot more feedback, which is not necessarily consciously taken. So what the body language is, what's the kind of tone that you're using, how are you sitting, how are you coming, how are you leaving, all of this adds on to our impressions of people and makes us understand or helps us understand them much better. Now, in the digital world, all of that, of course, is not available. And therefore, probably what I could have achieved in one meeting, I may be taking three in order to get that same understanding of the person. However, I think the people who have suffered are the ones, who have never had any corporate experience. And I received an email just a few days back from one of our employees. And this person had just joined straight from college. And you can imagine the kind of social life one used to have in college. Today, I think it's even more lively than what it was when we were in college. But he obviously has come from that kind of a situation, and suddenly he's all by himself in an apartment in Hyderabad, with absolutely no support system,
Right.
and having to do everything on the screen. And he was saying that I just can't take it anymore. I need to sort of connect with people. When are we going to open up, for heaven's sake? And the thing is, if you talk to them rationally, that there is a risk and the company can't put you into any kind of unsafe situation, they would, probably if they could, they would say, go to hell. It's our choice. Give us the choice to be able to go in and, to be able to connect. So it is a very, very difficult situation. We are trying our level best to create, these fun moments, the Friday evening sessions, Be Well talks. Salesforce does a Be Well camp, all together every single week. There is somebody over there to enthuse you, to motivate you, to inspire you. So we've done many things, like how do you create a balcony garden? How do you cook some of the dishes that you see on, say, some things like MasterChef? So, we've had cooking classes, we've had gardening classes, we've had art classes, we've done all kinds of things, But at the end of the day, this does not make up for the feeling of, camaraderie that is there, especially when you're doing a tough project and you've completed it, maybe signed a deal, the feeling of togetherness and celebration that comes in and gives you the impetus for going on, that is missing. And that definitely is something that all of us believe that it is important for us. Initially when we started all of this, and especially for people in Bangalore, they heaved a sigh of relief because many of them were saving something like 3 to 4 hours of commute time. And they were so glad, getting family time, no commute time, really, really glad. Now, you ask those people now, they would much rather have the commute time. They want
No,
to
I
get
think
back from there.
I can speak from experience on that one for sure.
Yeah. So the thing is, I think we have to initially, in fact, I was getting a little worried. What on earth is going to happen to all these commercial real estate guys? After all, my banking thing takes
Doesn't
me
go.
back to those loans.
Sure.
But as time went on, I realized that probably what this has done is it's created a hybrid model. It's like when we thought that newspapers would disappear. But now what happens is we get the newspapers, but we read on the digital media as well. So it's
Mhm.
like that. It's going to be a hybrid model where you'll have to allow people to come in, but maybe also allow them a little more work from home. But surely in this time, during this particular time, this has been an area of, which has really challenged us.
Sure. No, absolutely. I think it also means that the type of leadership that is going to be required in the future is going to be very different than probably what existed before. A lot of the command and control type leadership models have pretty much disappeared. I think now it's driven by empathy, it's driven by servant leadership, it's driven by, I mean, the higher you are in the organization, I would imagine that the more you need to be, empathetic towards what is going on in the rest of the organization to a large extent. Um, Having said that, I also want to kind of pivot a little bit to talk about the broader ecosystem. So, we some of this we have talked about is within an organization, just within the, kind of the virtual walls of your organization. But if you look at the ecosystem, as one of the other dimensions that has started expanding is, no company can stand alone. I mean, you always work in a network of others that you're part of. And we have a large chunk of our audience are startups, right? I mean, they are also trying to understand how to, one is the leadership of their own organizations and how to do that. But the second piece to the leadership is how do you connect better to other organizations? For example, in your case with Salesforce or even with the State Bank, right? I mean, PSUs in a broader sense. There is a lot of innovation that is required as we look ahead. I mean, the next 10 years is probably was projected last year as the digital decade. That hasn't gone away. In fact, it's become even more important now than even a year ago. So I think we'd love to hear your thoughts on, how do the startup founders lead their way for their organizations in connecting with larger organizations like Salesforce or VMware or whoever, and then also with, the innovation that's required for India, and how do they connect better with public sector organizations?
So, let me first talk about, the startup community, and then we can talk about the innovations for the public sector. In respect of the startup community, if I just take in order to make it a very simple example, you take the fintechs. Now, what do the fintechs have that the established players don't have? They have new ideas, they have agility, and they are very nimble. Okay,
Mhm.
that's what they have. Whereas if you look at the larger organizations, for them, the innovation itself is a challenge, because innovation needs a certain kind of a mindset of agreeing to sort of try and fail, which in established organization is far more difficult to do. Secondly, what they have, however, is they have the clientele and they have the trust. If I'm looking at a bank, people would much rather put their money in a bank which has been around for a very long time. And SBI, as really leverages on that. During the time of the Lehman crisis, the then SBI chairman said that we are not only the State Bank of India, we are the safe bank of India, because of the huge amount of deposits that was simply flowing into our accounts. So the thing is, we have what is called, we have stability, we have trust, and we have the organizational structure and the capability of doing few things. Okay. Now, obviously, each is supportive of the other. What we don't have the nimbleness and the agility, the ability to try and fail, the startups can bring to the table. What we don't have is the atmosphere of innovation, of taking on and thinking through and coming up with entirely new ideas. That is something that the startups can do very well. And one of the things, which I really appreciated about Salesforce is actually, taking me on board. Because frankly, I don't come from the IT industry. Why on earth am I heading an IT company? But, it talks about their wish to bring in new lenses to look at the same business. Now, using the startups can be like those new lenses for established companies to look at how things can be done. And if the companies understand the value of this, what they should normally and ideally do is to partner. And, when I was in SBI, and that's quite some time back now, it's more than 3 years. Even then, maybe 4 or 5 years back, I had set up a fund with the board approval of a 200 crore fund, whereby we said that we are going to work with the startups on three types of models. One is we could seed fund them, and if they come up with something that's really interesting for us, we could buy them out, or we could create a joint venture with them if they want to retain their identity. Or third, we could help them develop products which we can use on a transaction by transaction basis. So we created models, and then we told the startup community that if you have something that you believe that is a gap in our offering, or something that will help us deliver what we are doing better, please come and show it to us. And we created a group along with some external experts to actually go through what these people were doing, and then if necessary, put the two together in order to create something which is greater than the sum of the parts. And I think the startup community has to look for those kinds of things, because on their own to scale, yes, some will, but many more will sort of go under. So it's good if you are in a position to partner with a strong established base, and go ahead with it. I think that's something that startups should definitely look at.
Got it.
Regarding, pardon, sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say that from a larger company's perspective, they also need to get that empathy to work with startups, because the processes that large companies have of onboarding vendors and doing all that may not quite work for a startup, because of the fact that they are much smaller. They may not pass the bar of a lot of large company vendor model that exists.
No, I agree. I agree. And therefore, the company itself, the large companies themselves, and that is exactly where, we can sort of segue into your next question as to what is the innovation required for the PSBs or the PSUs. I think that's precisely what the PSUs need. What you said, which is the mindset to allow to have an open door for such companies to come in and show what value they can bring. And as you rightly have pointed out, it has to be a collaborative ecosystem now. Not one company can think of all of the things that they need to do in order to deliver better value to their customers. And there is no need, actually speaking, because, in many places, the wheel has already been invented. It's up to you to allow them to come and show it to you, so that, you can then take a call as to whether, you can accept this and go ahead with it. So I think, this is something, it's a mindset change that is definitely required. It's a change for, it's a vote for, for changing, for ensuring that, we don't slowly become irrelevant. This is a fight for relevance, actually, that we are having. So we don't want to become a dinosaur that has to disappear. We want to be able to be agile enough, maybe like a cockroach that exists for eons, because they are so adaptable. It's that adaptability, I think, that is very important, and it's necessary from both sides. It's not only from the side of the big companies, but also from the side of the small ones.
Yeah, we are almost out of time, Arundhati, but I think I see several comments and questions coming up about, you talked about adaptability. So
Mhm.
how has Arundhati adapted from a world of banking over into a tech organization, and what are some of the things that come over with you, and how are are there things that are changing as well in your mindset?
Well, for the first few weeks, I didn't even know what they were talking about because they use so many acronyms. But you know what reassured me was when I asked them for the full form of some of those acronyms, they
They
then
didn't
said
know.
themselves didn't know. Yeah. So that reassured me that I'm not as stupid as it appears.
Sure.
It's okay. But I think, it's been a whale of a learning process. And actually, I really don't know how I would have been able to go through these days of lockdown had it not been for the challenges that I had in getting attuned to an entirely new industry, and that too totally on the digital platforms. Strangely, and I have said this in other places, I had gone to San Francisco before I actually took over. So I was in San Francisco last December, I think, and I went to Salesforce Towers and I met Mark Benioff and the other C suite people. However, I never once met a single Salesforce India employee till date. Or no,
Okay.
I have. Just recently, I went to the signing of the Yes Bank deal. So I met a few of them there. But other than that, I had never ever met a Salesforce India employee, nor been to any of their locations. Okay. So that was a real, what should I say? It was a humdinger of a challenge, so to speak, but it kept me interested, it kept me challenged, and I didn't know how the weeks just rolled past.
Amazing.
So I think it's been a great experience learning an entirely new industry on the digital platform, but it's given me confidence that this is something that can be done. And people need to sort of step out of their comfort zone. It's
Great.
very important to step out of your comfort zone in order to make changes.
Thank you. Thanks, Arundhati. And I think we will leave everybody with that point you just made about stepping out of your comfort zone. Amazing, and all the best for your new journey.
Thank
And
you.
thank you very much.
Thank you.